Great day to you all. This is Gray Transforms. I am Travis Gray, and today I am grateful to be transforming with our guest, Fadrique Soma. Fadrique is a transpersonal therapist who focuses on interpersonal relationships, masculinity, and transpersonal development. He was an anointed priest of the Ethiopian Orthodox Christian order, ordained as a Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka, and studied in Sat Yoga School of Yogic Philosophy. Fadrique is an agent of social change. Mi hermano, ¿cómo estás? How are you?
Wow, brother, I'm so glad to be here with you again. We met briefly at Envision and we share a couple of words, and now it's amazing to be connected through the power of internet and technology. That's so cool. I'm so happy.
It is so cool that we can be connected anywhere in the world, and the way that we connected at Envision is super cool too. When I had attended a workshop that you were doing on authentic connecting, on authentic communication, and it was wonderful. It was so simple, but it felt like an internal reminder of how to communicate with another person authentically. And it was like, how do I forget all the time, as a therapist myself as well?
Yes.
It's like we can communicate with other people, but how is it that we just so easily forget how to communicate with others?
That's true. And I think that's one of the things that we mostly forget about, like the things that are mostly innate in us. We are so programmed and conditioned to communicate in different ways and to protect ourselves from each other that sometimes we just forget how simple it can be. But it also has its own complexities, like human connection and human, I'd say, communication has their own complexities. So I'm mostly fascinated about that topic, human connection and human communication. Is one of my main topics, one of the things that I worked with the most, actually.
Absolutely. And you were so phenomenal at it. I had to speak to you after the workshop, and the first thing that we discussed is you're a transpersonal therapist also. So you went to the a school of transpersonal development in Spain.
Mm-hmm. It's in Spanish it's called Escuela de Desarrollo Transpersonal. So it's that's where I studied. I mean, at the end of the day, my work, it's a conjunction of all of my paths, as I would say, as anyone who is in the path of human connection and therapies as well. But yeah, that's one of my main studies.
Absolutely. And so you do a great work there, and because of that, I wanted to continue to connect and have this conversation, and I mentioned like a conversation I've had with Dr. Jorge Freire, who's been very prolific in the field of transpersonal psychology, specifically in the areas of relationship dynamics, that he really pushes the edge of that. And I loved your thoughts. There was a lot of your social media, it's in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish, but muy poquito español. But I did translate one and a few. I've looked at the content, and the content is so good. There was one post that you did. It was just like, it felt synchronistic that I had chosen this one to translate, and it about it said something. There was like a saying about be careful, don't have a straw ass if you're climbing the candle. Like if you're going to do something radical, if you're going to be standing outside of traditional relationship dynamics, outside of convention in any way, shape, or form in your life, if you're going to be standing radically outside of the conventional parameters, then be careful, like be emotionally strong enough to handle that. Don't have a straw ass. You'll light on fire.
I love it, and I'm very much aware of that post. And that post actually came about because I've been a rebel most of my life. Not because I wanted to be honest, just because I've been driven by something that pushes me further than social norms since I was a kid. And I mean, I went to live in a Rastafarian community when I was 18. I was the only white guy there, that was radical. In school, I always wanted to have like long hair and all these things. They pushed me out of school, and so it's been now 20 years since I started my journey. I started my journey. I started to question all these things when I was like 15 or 16, and now I'm 39. So I'm very much aware of the price that one pays when one goes against the norm. And one of the things that people don't realize is that, so they just jump in the water when they can swim, so they cannot be at the stature of what they're actually rebelling to. So I speak a lot about rebelling, and for me right now, nowadays, it's not about rebelling, it's about questioning more than rebelling. So it's not about rebelling, let's say, to the norm of marriage. It's about questioning marriage so that you can have alternative options, and so that you don't have to stick to the norm. But if you want to stick to the norm, once you question the norm, then it's beautiful because you know what you're into it now. You question it already, and you still want to go in there. So nowadays, my approach is more about questioning more than rebelling itself. But yeah, I mean, the price of rebelling to whatever you rebel against what is socially approved, you're going to pay the price. And so I say, if you have an ass of straw, don't get close to the candle. Or if you can swim, don't jump in the water, which is pretty much the same.
Right.
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed, and that I've paid the price in many different ways. Part of being naive too, when I was very young, and so yeah, it's a beautiful topic actually.
Yeah, it is so aligned with this field of transpersonal psychology that does, one of the founders of the field, Abraham Maslow, and he wrote a book called The Farther Reaches of Human Nature. If you are going to question what is beyond that edge, then you must be emotionally strong enough to, at best you're alienated, or you are, you can be shunned, you can be pushed outside of your social dynamic, your family. It can be a tough situation, but I do resonate also, and I think a lot of transpersonal therapists would also resonate with this rebellious nature that is so prevalent in them.
Yeah. I mean, it can even go to the point of someone killing you, depending on, I mean, if it's political. How many figures they have killed in the political arena because they've been somehow transgressing the norm. So it's something to consider. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, speaking your truth can be a threat to your own existence if it's against the social norms.
Yeah. So no, having that in consideration, one must ask oneself, do I really want to speak my truth within this particular context? And for what reasons too, so yeah.
Absolutely, it's crazy. So so you were as a young person, like a teenager, you were interested in the mystical path. You were exploring outside of those standard norms. You were feeling that rebellious nature, and then you joined. You said you joined a Rastafarian church. You chose that's the Ethiopian Orthodox Christian church. Is that right? So like you join this church, and what is your life like in those early ages when you're in that church, when you get ordained as a monk? What were those experiences like to have you find a transpersonal development and these things?
It all started when I was like 15. I mean, it all started because I've been a fan of reggae music since I was like 10 years old, perhaps. And my mom has a hostel in the Caribbean side of Costa Rica. So I've been somehow uh, close to Afro-American culture. And I remember when I was in high school, I remember like listening to the lyrics behind the reggae music. And I remember saying to myself, like, this is a movement and it's a philosophy and it's a way of life. And they speak about this and they speak about that. And the rebellious nature of reggae music, which it's very in it, somehow possessed me in a way. And I say possessed me because it really possessed me. I mean, I didn't question it. I was like so into it. So I started to read more about this because I listened to Rastafari and Haile Selassie and emancipation and redemption and Africa and all of these things. And I was curious about it. So I started to study by myself. And then I found like two friends of mine who were interested too. So we started to, like mimic the Rastafari way of life in our own way. We were kids, we were in school. So we would, like go to the mountains and read the Bible and start to study by ourselves. And when I was 18, I was like, fuck it. I want to experience this in like really go for it. This is something that has characterized me pretty much all my life, that if something hooks me, I want to live it. I cannot just read it. So, and in certain ways I've been extreme, to a certain extent. I'd say now I'm more balanced. But I've been very extreme in my own search. I'll push the limits to really experience what I'm actually reading. So when I was 18, I said I'm going to Jamaica and I want to live in a Rastafarian community and experience this. So I studied, we tried the options, and I was drawn to this particular order of Rastafari, which is called Bobo Shanti, which is a churchical order, it's a priesthood order. Mm-hmm. It's the Orthodox order within the Rastafarian orders. Mm-hmm. So it's very, ritualistic and devotional, and there is a way to do everything. They're very ordered. It's not like the typical Rastafari that you see in Jamaica, like the cliche. It has their own vows and all of this. So I was going to start university, and then I dropped and I went to Jamaica, and I found this place and I stayed there, and then I became a priest, and then a whole chapter in my life opened up. I stayed for almost 8 years there, and I traveled to different countries spreading the message and all of these things. So that was my introduction into the spiritual world in a way. And then after that, I mean, it's a long story. I can tell you more if you have questions, but I don't want to take over.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So now I'm seeing the connection of how, this order was this tradition was very Buddhist like. There was a way to do all of the things, and so then that kind of that was an easy connection for you to become a Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka. So I'm fascinated by the sort of discipline that creates early in a person's life. Yes. So often we don't have the discipline created early in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I get goosebumps and everything, because when my schoolmates were drinking and having fun, I was waking up at 4 a.m., sweeping the ground for the priest to come and preach, and taking cold showers and cooking in fire and having a very austere way of life. I'm not saying this to brag, but it was the reality. Like, it gave me a very solid foundation and things that we in society usually don't get exposed to. So that was something very particular. And then there's something that it's still a mystery for me, but I've been drawn all my life. I mean, my lifestyle is now different, but for some mysterious reason, I've been drawn to austerity all my life, to living very I don't know if you know, if you read that part of the story, but I lived as a mendicant for 1 year without money, with a donkey that I had in my country and all. So for some reason, I've been always drawn to all sorts of austerity, like very austere way of life. So in Jamaica, I used to live like in a hut 2 by 2. Uh, we didn't have water, we didn't have electricity. We collect water from the rain. That's what we drank, and I slept on the floor. So being driven by this, uh, let's say, simple way of life, Buddhism was always something that drew my attention, because uh, I went to the Theravada tradition, which is the most austere tradition in Buddhism. It's a mendicant and renunciate tradition, so that drove me there too. I wanted to experience the life of a monk and not having possessions and all of these things. So when I left the Rastafarian tradition, I was very close-minded. I mean, this was my first path, so I was very close-minded. I thought this was the only truth and all of these things, and I dropped all that, and then I opened myself to different traditions. And one of those traditions that caught my attention was Buddhism, and that's how I got into.
Yeah, but like I said, it's because it matches so much. I don't think that it is a brag at all. It's just because when we are all that age, we are not interested. Like a majority of teenagers or teenage boys, men, women would at that age are interested in partying. They're interested in having fun and doing things, but that becomes like that is the conventional norm of what society probably appreciates, that these kids are just troublemakers and having a good time and not shaping themselves and honing themselves. But you just followed your heart, you followed your interests, and that became such a foundation of shaping you into the person that you are. And that's incredible. It is something that, in hindsight, we look back at that, we wish we had more of that kind of disciplined life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm totally grateful about it. I think it has provided me with a lot of with a solid foundation in many respects, and nowadays uh, I got the privilege to somehow retrieve all the information that I've collected in my different paths to now be of service to the world.
Yeah.
And I feel that's powerful and beautiful. So I'm very much glad that it was like that. It's a different path now. There's a price for that too, because all of those years when I was in this, let's say, spiritual paths and ways of renunciation, I wasn't interested at all in making money, for example. Like, it didn't even cross my mind. It wasn't part of my mental structure. In certain ways, I was rebelling against the system too. I mean, there's some dark triads too within, this heroic path that I followed that now I'm aware of. Like, also like dismissing some sort of sense of responsibility in the world and all of these things that I know that I'm aware of that too. But there was also a lot of innocence too. But now that so there was a time in my life when I renounced to like all spiritual organizations and paths, and I just choose to like make a merge of all the paths and start to serve in the world. So when I left all the spiritual communities and I found myself in the world with like mundane responsibilities, I struggled with that a lot because I wasn't trained for that. And my mates, they were more prepared than me in that sense, but they were not prepared that like me in the sense that I was. So, you know, it was a very, I struggled a lot because I wasn't aware of how to make money, how to manage myself in the world, the rules of the world, like the let's say the conventional world are very different from the rules that I was used to. And I was a leader. I was a leader in the spiritual community. And when I was here, I was no one because I didn't have the, you know, the signs of someone who was successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Material in the material world, you know, that was very interesting. So that was a struggle for me, and I got depressed for a moment, and I struggled with that until I somehow got to retrieve all of my knowledge to start working and to put it into service. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I completely understand what you're saying. And it is fascinating how no matter what, our shadows and our light and our darkness, it appears differently in different people. The way that we grow up, it's going to be different for everybody, unique to that individual experience. And then as you're becoming more of a conscious agent on your path, you are figuring out what those shadows are. And we all have some sort of shadow. We all have some sort of darkness that we need to become understanding of, aware of, so that we can integrate this into our lives in a way that can benefit us. And it's really beautiful that you noticed. I have noticed that I don't have this same desire to have this austere life necessarily. I didn't grow up exactly like that. I would like to have more than we had. We already had so little that I've never wanted to continue to have little. I've wanted to have more. And then I've seen there's in like this new thought community of people, these conscious people, people will desire to be off the grid, the energy grid. There's a lot of benefit to that, but then to create these communities that are somehow no longer responsible to the social change in the world, no longer, just so isolating themselves from the way of like human beings collectively across the world. It has not resonated with me. It's like I don't know that that's a reality. That's not a reality that you are getting yourself off the grid. But I think like a part of the antidote to that, because money, the root of all evil, like this idea that we're always looking for a piece of paper, or we're all always looking for these social metrics of wealth and value. That doesn't resonate with me. But this idea of resourcefulness, it doesn't matter what age that human beings have been in, but especially as a man in masculinity, this ability for this man to be resourceful, whatever that looks like. It doesn't necessarily need to look like money. If that person can hunt and provide and build and do those things, then that is the resourcefulness that is attractive to the world around them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean that has changed in my life. Like now I live a very different life, and it's plentiful, and I would say more leaned into the side of abundance. For me, renunciation nowadays, it's more a symbolic and inner stance than whatever you possess in the outside world. But that took some time for me to mature. And for some reason I devout myself to this path of complete renunciation to learn a couple of things there, and now live a very different life. But yeah, I mean, I do resonate with the word resourceful. I like that word, actually. The capacity for you to have opportunities, or to not to have, but to create opportunities, right? The possibility for you to know that, let's say you're lacking of something, and then you can go and hunt that for you to provide. I think that's a very beautiful quality to have as a man, for sure.
Yeah, and you know, you as a transpersonal professional, a spiritual professional, for viewers, some people will know the transpersonal language, but transpersonal and spiritual are very synonymous terms, but it is beyond this egoic
Yeah.
personality, any experiences that are beyond that. And so for you as a transpersonal professional, a spiritual professional, a thought leader, an agent of social change, I love that you are living in abundance and plentiful now in your life. I love that your resourcefulness is actualizing more and more every day. I think that we often don't have enough pragmatism. We don't have enough spiritual pragmatism. We don't have enough practicality and the sort of entrepreneurship that is required for somebody to get their message out and impact as many people as possible. There's a really great book called The Mother by Sri Aurobindo. Do you know this?
Yeah.
You know The
I
Mother?
think Aurobindo ashram in India too.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. That's amazing. So I read this like little copy of The Mother, just like a really small square book. I read this every day for a month, just like was really studying. I just loved the writing, loved everything about it. There is a chapter in there about money specifically. And the whole idea of the chapter was that the reason that you are gaining the resources, the wealth, the money, whatever, that is an energetic resource that you are taking back for God. You are using that as a resource for the mother. Why would you do anything less than be and gain as much as you can so that you can then, you know, be the tool, be the faculty, be the agent, be the soldier of God, be the tool that God is using to work through the world through you. And I think that is also a beautiful idea that is resonant with this piece of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And then there are so many beliefs against or towards money within the, let's say, spiritual community in general, you know, like that somehow is all the limiting beliefs, you know, in regards to money that I used to have in certain ways too. And I had to do the work to somehow tramp down those beliefs and live a more abundant life. I believe, and if you see nature is abundant itself. Everything in nature is always prolific, always giving, always. So I believe that's our nature too.
Yeah, I agree, and especially where you are in Costa Rica, you are you are living the you know, it's amazing. I was hearing when I was at the Envision Festival, I was hearing about these beautiful properties of land in Costa Rica, or just other people also. This community, this festival attracted the spiritual community that is very conscious and aware that all of the relationships that I was connecting with at the festival were people that were all living resourceful lives. They were using the faculties of their knowledge base, their foundation of knowledge, to live resourceful and abundant lives. And to do that where you're living on a piece of land that is so plentiful is an amazing expression and way to live in the embodiment of nature's abundance. In Costa Rica, it's such a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's I mean, Costa Rica is so lush and so abundant in that sense, you know, and the rivers and jungles and there's something very interesting about Costa Rica is that we have microclimates, micro weather. Like from in a 30-minute distance, you can go up to the hills and you feel almost like if you were in a forest in Europe. And 45 minutes from the distance, like from the capital, you're in the closest beach, which is tropical, and you know. So, and then you're in the city, so you have these micro weathers where you can experience like different ambiances or environments in a very short frame of time.
Right. So in Vision Festival, the workshop that you did in relationships, what was incredible. It was so simple but incredible. You were speaking about specificity and objectivity, and in the ways that people communicate. And I was reminded that because I'm a transpersonal therapist, and we talk about spiritual things, and I'm reading books that is very non-specific because it's speaking about God. It's speaking about so a lot of the information I'm taking in a very metaphorical way, and so I'm probably speaking very metaphorically to my intimate partners, my relationships. And it dawned on me during your workshop that was like, you just can't be so metaphorical. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because I relate to what you're saying a lot too, because I mean, I grew up in a spiritual realm too, like for most of my, I wouldn't say most of my life, but 20 years of my life, I've been into the realm of non-specificity and ethereal concepts about the soul and about God and all these things, that actually I moved on from all of these things. Like, and that's when I wouldn't say, I mean, I love the symbolic world, and I think it's, but I keep it to myself most of the time, because I realize that when it comes to communicating something, it's much more practical and powerful when it's something that people can relate to, instead of using these lofty words about spirituality and this thing. Like at the end of the day, it's like, it almost, for me nowadays, it almost feels like nonsense. Unless the person that's talking about that like has it somehow integrated within themselves in a symbolic way. But I usually, if you see my post, like if you read my post in Spanish and the way I speak, I don't speak about spiritual concepts anymore. It's all down to earth. And so, and I when I came in contact with like nonviolent communication and assertive communication and authentic relating, all these things, one thing that I noticed that was so powerful was the specificity and objectivity too. Like when it comes to communicate ideas and thoughts and feelings and all of these things, So so yeah, I mean, that's one thing I'd like to say. And the other thing I'd like to say is that what I've experienced in my own personal field of relationships is, we as humans, we tend to, like, the brain tends to interpret all the time whatever we are seeing, whatever we are observing, or whatever we are hearing, and we do that with the filter of our own subjectivity, how we grew up, the traumas that we've been into, and all our personal issues that we're carrying through. The way that we interpret things gets tinted by all of our own subjective reality. So there's a glitch in communication when you act out from that place, which is that I'm speaking from a place that you're not aware of. It's so subjective. It has to do so much with my own reality that you'll never understand what I'm saying, So when you communicate from that place, the communication itself, it has a glitch. And then I believe that this is the source of most conflict when it comes to communication. So specificity, objectivity, I think I do know that it's the thing that helps us to lower down conflict in relationships. The more specific you can be, the less interpretative you can be about something that you're saying, the clearer the message comes in.
That is great elaboration on that concept, that myself, I could be so stuck in the world of my own subjective experience that I am just making these assumptions and beliefs and desires for others to see it in my same subjective experience, and they cannot interpret it the way that I am interpreting it. And so if I am going to communicate any kind of message directly, specifically. I need to be specific and objective. And where does decisiveness come into this? Because it seems that a lot of people may have a challenging time with speaking specifically because they are undecided by how they are wanting to communicate, or undecided about what they really want.
Yeah, I'd say decisiveness is a huge part of it. But I mean, if I stick to the word like objectivity and precisiveness in speech, it has more to do with, like simple things, but it's just we're not aware of it. But like when you say, let's say you say, even the word like "I love you," what does that mean? It's very ambiguous. When you say "I love you," what does that mean? It means that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and even if I don't feel like, or it means that I feel like a cuddly sensation when I'm with you. Like, what does it mean when I say I love you? Even that thing. Just to mention an example. But when you say to someone, "Hey, I like you to be more responsible," like, what does that mean? So if you can, before you say something like that to someone, like let's say, I don't know, you're having an issue with your partner and you're saying, "Hey, if you can be just more responsible," what does that mean? So think about what does that mean in a practical sense to be more responsible. For example, would you be willing to wash the plates after we eat, like right after we eat? That's more now I can say yes or no. But responsible is so broad and so ambiguous that the other person will understand it by what their own interpretation of responsibility is. So right now there's a glitch because I'm saying, "Can you be more responsible?" And the other person says yes, but within their own belief of what responsible is. So then I get mad because the other person said yes and is not being coherent with my own belief of being responsible. But I wasn't clear in the first place to what I meant, to what I wanted to really express or convey. So that's why specificity is such a huge topic when it comes to communicating effectively and practically.
Beautifully said. And in the workshop, you had been speaking to somebody particular, and he was just discussing his dynamic. And it's like, oh well, I want to be heard, I want to be seen, I want to be understood. Well, what does any of that mean?
Exactly.
What does any of that mean specifically? And this is incredible because in therapeutic context, as a therapist, so many therapists are speaking in that way. Oh, you want to be heard, you want to be seen, but that is not helping them get to the roots of their of the glitch that you're speaking to.
Exactly. So when he was saying to me, I just want to be heard by my partner, is like, okay, so what does your partner has to do specifically in order for you to think that she is actually hearing you? Like these kind of things, like just like asking questions to get to the root of what is actually happening in a very objective and a specific way.
I've gotten into a problem with the glitch in my own life because and we all do, but growing up, because of American Sign Language being such, it's my first language. I actually was learning sign language prior to verbal communication.
Wow.
And so my body language is so important. My body language, my expression, and sometimes it even triggers other people. I've experienced that something about my mannerisms, something about how that is ingrained into me can be triggering for others. But when I am communicating a message to somebody, a friend, an intimate partner, whatever, I'm expecting the the body language to already be understood. The like what I believe the body language should look like. I'm expecting the glitch for me is that I'm expecting that you already know that nodding and looking at me, eye contact. Even for some people that seems so simple, and for others it's not as necessary. It doesn't feel as necessary to the subjective experience. So it's about communicating to that partner in relationship. What is it that you want this to look like? What makes you feel what gives you the heart yes, the emotional yes, that this feels like it's resonating properly.
Mm-hmm.
See that, like,
like what you're saying, what I'm hearing that you're saying is that you're so used to like nonverbal behavior, let's say, or mannerism. It's so important for you that you think that because of you nodding, people will understand your intention or whatever you want to convey. But not necessarily the case, right?
Right.
And that can also somehow create a havoc in the communication.
Right. And so it's like in this world of social media, when people are like looking at their phones, they have now been trained that I can be looking at my phone and doing things here and still listening and still giving my attention to you also. And that don't work for me. It might work for somebody else. It don't work for me.
Yeah.
And so just knowing what works for you, knowing what works. How does Fadrique? How does one find out what works for them?
Yeah. So let's take the example of the phone. I'm with you, and let's say we're having a convo, and I'm looking at my phone while I'm talking to you and while you're talking to me. And then all of a sudden you say to me, why is it that you never put attention to me? And so you are that's the first glitch, that you are interpreting that I'm not listening to you because I'm looking at the phone. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not paying attention to you. But so there's a couple of truths there. One truth is that you're not necessarily sure that the fact that I'm looking at the phone means exactly that I'm not listening to you. That's one thing. But the other truth is that whether that's true or not, you don't like it. You don't like the fact that I'm not looking at you, perhaps. So I'll ask you, for example, what makes you think that I'm not paying attention to you? And then you can say, well, because you're looking at the phone. So I can say to you, okay, so two things. Are you aware that the fact that I'm looking at the phone doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not listening to you? That's one thing that I can ask you. And another thing that I can ask you is, okay, so do you rather me putting the phone off while you're talking to me, even if looking at the phone, even if I can look at the phone and also listen to you, you rather me doing that? And then you can say, yes, for me, it's better. I just feel more connected when you look at me in the eyes, or when like we are staring at each other, or somehow you're not in the phone while you talk to me. So now I know that this is important to you. So how do you know what is important to them? By asking. Mm-hmm. By asking, like, okay, so now I'm aware that you, as my friend, you rather me, like when we're having a conversation, you rather me not being on the phone. And then I can take it further. I can say to you, okay, so, I mean, we're friends, so we're hanging each other all the time. And sometimes I'll be at your house and I'll be looking at the phone while you're talking to me about something like trivial. Would you be willing to let me know when is something important that you're telling to me that you want my whole attention? Because otherwise I wouldn't know how to, we'll be talking all the time. So it's all the time that you don't want me to be on the phone. But what if we're just like spending the whole day together and I'll be looking at the phone? So, that's a specific too, can you be more specific? When is it a right time for me to like listen to you, perhaps because you want to tell me something that is important to you. You see? So that's another way to be specific with the other person. Like they can tell you, and then so the other person, so then at that time you can tell me, yes, okay, so yeah, we can do that. I can say to you, hey, Fadri, there's something important I want to speak to you. Then I know that means put the phone off and I'll listen to you. If I'm in the mood, or if I'm in this, otherwise I'd say to you, hey, can we speak like 10 minutes later? I'm on something, but this is, like this is a conversation that I'd have with you if you're my friend and you come with me like that.
Yeah. This is a great time to let the tribe know about the Gray Transforms website, graytransforms.com. This is a great place to go to check out all the links to the podcast. It's a great place to support the podcast, to support the channel. You can get a Gray Transforms t-shirt with a transegoic gnosis symbol for transformation on the back. You can get a Gray Transforms bullet journal. This is a simple tool, but this is a tool for mastery. You can get stickers. You can get a Gray Transforms mug. So you can drink great tea in your Gray Transforms mug while you are taking notes in your Gray Transforms bullet journal, while you are listening to high-level transformative conversations on the Gray Transforms podcast. So comment, like, share, subscribe, follow, and together this tribe is moving humanity forward. Let's get back to this conversation. Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. It's so awesome when I hear you elaborating on these ideas. Oh, I'm getting like a deja vu moment right now in this moment. But when I'm hearing you speak about this, it feels like it feels so profound, because human beings are social beings. Relationships is, I've often said that relationships is the hardest stuff.
Yeah.
It's the most difficult thing in this lived
Totally.
existence, because you interact with it the most. It's all about how well you can be in relationship to one another. And so when you say these things, and it's like, it's so, it's theoretically it's so simple. You're speaking very. It does take practice. It does take practice. It does take work to be able to communicate in this way, to understand what language that you are using to communicate. In past, I have taught nonviolence programs, and we were talking about solution-oriented conversation, conflict resolution conversations, and so using I statements and things like this. And that, when you are adopting this way of thinking and this new language in order to communicate specifically and objectively, it takes some time to get that worked out within yourself, and patience and all of that. But relationships is some of the hardest stuff. And then when you say this, I'm like, man, it feels so profound. It feels like you like that the short thing that you have just communicated to me about how to relate to another person feels just as profound as some of these really deep spiritual ideas. It's just as profound. So like you were saying in your social media posting earlier, you're saying, I don't really speak about spiritual concepts. I keep that stuff to myself mostly, but I'm more practical. I'm more grounded. I'm bringing real world application to people, and that is so much value. More or less, I'm not sure, but it has so much value. So thank you for continuing to do this work.
You're also welcome, brother. Thank you for having me here talking about these things. I love it. I love to share with you.
Absolutely. So so the feminine masculine. So you had recommended a couple of books, and one book I had already read, and I'm getting into this other one, but I've already read and I've recommended, I've gifted this book to clients before, and that is The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. And I think he is so good at elaborating on the masculine principle specifically, and then the dynamic of feminine, masculine within every individual. I think he is very good at doing that. And then you brought up and he is coming from the more masculine perspective, but that book can be valuable to men and women alike. And then you recommended another book that I have just gotten into, and this is like The Way of the Wild Woman.
Yeah, of Michaela Bohm.
Yeah. Oh wow. This book is so great, and now it is more heavy on the feminine principle, the feminine dynamic, what it's like to be a female in this world, a woman in this world, and rewilding yourself. And so both of these books, they're such good recommendations. They're very great complements of each other. Well, what are your thoughts on these masculine, feminine principles within everyone?
I mean, this is a broad topic for sure. I've been into this topic for like, let's say the last 6-7 years, like, and there's one thing that somehow it's also ambiguous when you speak about the masculine and the feminine, especially when you speak about like qualities, like, you know, like what is a feminine quality and a masculine quality, and why would you say that's feminine? That's one of the things that people pointed on to very much, and it's quite controversial to speak about that in that way, because then people, they don't understand that it doesn't have to do with your sexuality, but it has to do with an energetic principle. So it becomes somehow confusing, and one way in which I've somehow get to pass that confusion is by just thinking in terms of duality. You know, like everything in the world of material forms, it has their own duality. You know, light and darkness, tall or short, in and out, penis and vagina, what is dry and what is moist. So same way, we have different ways in which we can manifest in the world. And if you don't like to call it masculine or feminine, it's okay. Just know that as you can be proactive in the world, you can be passive, right? So that's one of the things that I've been also like trying to get into the way I teach these things. Like, don't get confused about if it's masculine or feminine. Just know that there are two ways in which you can move in the world. A way in which it contains everything that has to do with forward energy, moving into what is it that you want, and, you know, like this kind of like principle of focus and vision, and they tend to be called like masculine qualities. And that has a biological principle too. Like when you see the penis is a protuberance that sticks out, right? Is what is given. Or the sperms, they compete with other millions of sperms, and they go for what they want to, which is to penetrate the ovule and the egg. And the egg is more like a passive magnet of attraction, which stands and then selects by which sperm being penetrated and all these things. So there is a reason why it's called masculine and feminine principle. And is it because and David Deida speaks about this, like he says, like 80 to 90% of men, they have more integrated this kind of proactive energy within themselves, you know? And then the same happens to women within feminine qualities. So that's one thing I'd like to say, like if you don't want to call it masculine or feminine, just know that there are different ways in which you can manifest into the world, and you can choose in which way to express yourself according to the circumstances that you're living. Sometimes it is required of you to be soft and tender, and some because of the context and the specificity of the moment that you're living. And you better have that tool at hand. Otherwise, you'll be rigid all the time. And guess what? At that time, at that specific moment, what it was required of you wasn't this rigidity, which, by the way, is a dark it is a dark masculine quality. So that's the beautiful thing about this, is like you can also, choose and have like different tools at hand and how to manifest into the world. If you want to launch a podcast, you'll need this, like strength and focus and let's say masculine, like quality to do what you want and to be responsible for that. And then the other thing is that just as everything, they both have their own dark and luminous side. So if leadership and this sense of like dominance can turn also into somehow despotism and power over structures, as well as receptivity, the feminine quality to receive can turn into submissive, into submission. And so that's another thing I like to say. So to understand both polarities so that you can work them within you, however you feel it's more appropriate, and also being aware of how both polarities manifest their own dark sides too, so that you can be aware of that. But as I say, I mean, this is a huge topic. I mean, I usually give a retreat on this, so we can speak about.
No, you're amazingly put, and totally resonate with what I see. I think that there's I guess I would just add again to re-emphasize that both of these principles are in every individual. Every human being has both of those qualities and dualities, shaping them and shaping their lives in different ways, and to find a sense of balance in the dance of those two principles is really important. But to figure out how that you can do that in relationships and in the world, in your endeavors, that's really powerful. So when I like, man, just this continued commitment to the specificity of the objectivity of what you're saying, your philosophy that you're bringing, your message that you're bringing. This continued commitment to it is so powerful, because you're 100% right. Like, what is feminine? What is masculine?
Exactly. It's so ambiguous. Like, why would you say that? Like, what would you say that focus? It's a masculine quality. Like, again, it's so ambiguous. So, in order to put away that ambiguity, let's just say that there are, two different forces in the world. One that is passive and one that is proactive. And then within that range, there are certain ways in which you can move within the range of being proactive, like forward movement energy, I'd say.
It's important. Like, I have a hard time with, like, I think the spiritual and like the arguments of spiritual enlightenment of like, what is the philosophy that, like, is it non-symbolic state, or is it weaved integrated symbolic state? I lean more on the weaved integrated symbolic thing, and so because of that makes it's valuable to have words to define and direct. Those words allow you to be objective and specific. The words do help point in the intended direction, so when you're saying things like feminine or masculine, that is a part of why somebody is doing that, to speak to specific things, or attempt to, but it just does not go all the way there. It doesn't get all the way there. But in the learning, in the learning of these things, they can also be helpful words. It's great, the passive and active principle. I like those words used, because those are less, they're less socially identified. They're less identified in the social dynamic of right and wrong somehow. And so when people are saying things like, "Oh, that's the toxic masculine," it's like the toxic masculine. So you're saying that the masculine principle as a whole that is expressed through this person, no matter what they are doing, that is maybe not in alignment with how you see this supposed to be expressed in the world. You're saying that all of that is sick. It is wrong. It is bad. And then the same thing when a man says, "Oh, it's just like these gender wars about what is masculine and feminine and what is best, and it's best to be submissive." Michaela, in the Way of the Wild Woman, she was speaking about submission is not. That's not everything that a woman needs or should be in the world. Only submissive, but and as you were just saying right now, a man does not need to only be this dominating force.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I also believe that we have different facets in the world. Like, it's, perhaps in the bed you're very dominating, but in the work structure you're not, and you're more, let's say, submissive, or like, it can manifest in different things. Like, in one thing you're dominating, in other things you're not that much dominating. Actually, you're the one who is being pinned down, for example. So that's another thing to consider. Like, so let's say perhaps you're with a woman that is very submissive in the bed, but she's a badass in the work, and she's very, like, driven and focused, and like, so it's not that if you're dominant in all areas of your life. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it goes that way, because that's another thing that they speak about. Like, even though we do have the potential to manifest both things, both ways, we do lean into certain kind of nature, and so that David Data, which somehow it speaks to me, like, it rings true, is that he says that, there is people that leans more into the masculine side of personality, and then there are people who they lean more into the feminine side, and then there are people who are more balanced. Like, they can be, like, they dance more within one and the other in a much more flowy and natural way. But there are some other people that are more, like, into the structure and the frame of masculinity, and it's very hard for them to, like, dive into their, like, femininity. And then the same applies to other people who are more, like, into the feminine flow and the spontaneity, and it's not natural for them to, like, actually, go and take a swim into the masculine side.
Right. And like, these rigid ways of being one way or the other is causing a lot of insecurity in individuals. Like, and I guess when I'm saying insecurity in this context, I'm speaking of, like, division and fracturing and fragmenting and disintegrity. The wholeness is being broken apart, shattered in some cases, because of like this idea that masculinity or femininity should look a specific way, but we already know that nature just isn't any specific way. It is very dynamic, and Yeah. It's troubling to see just how much insecurity and broken apartness this creates in the world of people.
Yeah. And also there's like this kind of like social burden of like, if you're a man, you have to be in a certain way. I would say the way I see this is like, hey, so for me, and I know this is controversial, but for me, a man is someone who has a penis. So if you have a penis, you're a man, and nothing can make you less of a man because you are a man already. But you can be a man that is less proactive. You can be a man that is less um, strong physically and emotionally and mentally. You can be a man that is less let's say brave. You can be a man that is more brave, that is stronger, that is more proactive. So it's not that because if you do this or you don't do that, you're less of a man. It's not that you're less of a man. It doesn't exist. You're a man, but you're a man that can be less proactive if you don't practice that, if you're not aware of that, if you don't get in touch with that. So it all depends on what kind of man you want to be. So ask yourself, is this the way I want to manifest in the world as a man? And if you're okay with that, then it's your path. But if you're not okay with that because you like to be stronger physically and mentally, so go and work out, lift weight, put yourself into challenging situations, make your mind stronger, do something about it, but don't stay with the version of man that you don't like. Do something about it, develop the qualities that you like to integrate within yourself, and then be happier with your own version. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't actually think that any person that wants to be the ideal version of themselves, any person that wants to be whatever rings true for them, whatever truly rings true for them, I don't believe that they can do that outside of the experience of adversity, the experience of challenges, you discovering the relationship that you want in your life. I think really it's going to come through heartbreak in other relationships as well. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that. But the 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 person that wants to be, a little braver, or a little, like, there are great qualities that are deemed masculine and feminine, and both of those qualities can be resonant and developed and integrated into one's way of being in the world, and you can develop those skills and things. And I don't think that, like, a person that wants to be their best self can do that without the adversity and challenge that comes with striving for better qualities.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I do believe as well. Although I'm very free in the sense of giving person the permission to express themselves in the way they want. But I encourage people to ask themselves, is this really the way? Like, this is how I see myself living this world. And if you really, I mean, who am I to actually say, no, you're not. I know you're faking it. I know you're saying this because well, it can be, but at the end of the day, we don't know. I rather think that way. But if you ask me personally, I think that challenges are part of life, and challenges are part of what makes you stronger in the world and what makes you somehow more achieving and more stronger and all of the and like, the thing with challenge is that, honestly, just the fact of being a human is challenging, so you cannot escape challenge. Even if you're all set in the material world, and let's say you have less challenges to face, the fact that you're a human and the fact that you are going to face somehow sickness and aging and death it will put you in a certain challenge, even if you don't want to face challenge. So life is challenging by itself, but the way you face challenge, then it's different. You know, there are different ways in which you can face challenge as a human being, and that has to do with your character and the fact that you face challenge in a way that is somehow dignifying. It's different that if you face challenge without like just or it's different that if you want to actually escape from challenge.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then. Do you think that there are I like your re-emphasis on that that you believe that people freely identify expressing, choosing the expression that they want to have in the world, but then also a soft question of like, oh well, like also look at that, and is this really how you just, you know, make sure that you are studious in asking yourself about, is this the way that I want to be in the world? I think that re-emphasis on that is really great, really intelligently done. And so now, is there, you know, there's books, there's this information, there's lots of information about how to do certain things better. And so like, what is better? I'm not exactly sure. That's interesting. Maybe, you know, it means that the result came easier, or the result was more fruitful, if the act of getting there was done better. But it seems like I would probably argue that every man, if we're just speaking on masculinity, but I also believe every woman would benefit from exercise. That I'm trying to align with some of the I'm trying to speak in a way that aligns with some of the not so rigid, this is the way that you should be in the world thing. I'm trying to align with that. But then at the same time, there's a piece of me that is like, everybody should be working out. Everybody should be exercising, eating healthy. Like, I mean, what do you think?
The way it's I like this. I like this question. Let me see how I put it in words. So I think there's a difference in what I do believe is best for everyone than actually imposing that on others, you know, like, so it's like the fact that I do believe that, because I also believe that if it's beneficial for everyone to do exercise, but at the end of the day, I don't have time to force people to do anything. That's the thing, you know, like, it's at least it's not my path, you know, to be the savior and to impose my own beliefs of what's right and wrong. I just throw in out the seed, and whosoever wants to catch the seed, then it's okay, and if not, then it's okay. At the end of the day, it's their lives, you know, like, so even though I do believe also that exercise is beneficial for everyone, I don't care if people do it or not, because it's not my life. To be honest, that's what that's what I have to say.
Yeah. Well said. Perfectly said. Like, that's a really clear answer to that question. And it's like, if you are like forcefully imposing, like it's one thing to plant seeds. It's one thing to be like, well, you know, my message, my life is my message. So I think Gandhi said that my life is my message. So it's like, if I believe that exercise works really well in my life, and I think subjectively, I personally believe that it can work for everybody's life. If this is not how you are experiencing the world, that is perfectly fine. But if I were to forcibly impose it, then I am creating an imposition on the authentic expressing of your life. Now
Exactly.
I'm doing you a major disservice. Something horrific, something on the edge of horrific, or it can be. It depends on to what degree that this is happening. This imposing is happening, but I am creating an imposition on your life to receive, to experience the self-discovery, the beauty of self-discovery as you find out what works for you.
Totally, I agree. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Nothing like
that. Yeah. I mean, that's so awesome. So this conversation is so ripe with beautiful, fruitful information about relating to one another, also about relating to ourselves. It, you know, it's wonderful. It is like wide ranging, and it was summarizing, and it wasn't too heady, too spiritual. It was grounded in practical application in your life, and so simply. And that is how I see your work. That's the beauty that I see in your work. Thank you, Fadrique. I actually did want to ask you another thing about about embodied experiencing and embodied inquiry. So on Instagram, you are Fadrique.Soma. The Soma, is that your last name, or?
it's not my last name. It's just a pseudonym. How you call it?
Yeah, because of like somatic, or
Yeah.
is that?
Well, because of different things. One, because the in the how you call the Indian what's the Indian language again? Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, in the old tales of Sanskrit, in the Vedic lectures, Soma is an elixir that the priests used to drink in order to connect with higher worlds. So that was one thing. Then Soma in Greek is the body, which is the embodied experience, the practical way. And then Soma is the center of the cell too. So it has to do with center, with practicality, and also with the connection to the higher worlds.
I love that. I love the building on your own narrative in those ways. I think that is so beautiful and powerful for people. I work with people a lot in the building of their own narrative around their names and things like that. It's really a powerful idea. And so I loved that yours is Soma, because in the something that a part of the insights that I gained from that experience at the Envision Festival was the value and importance of doubling down on my commitment to a physical practice. I exercise, and I like to put myself through challenging physical adversity, but doubling down on the value of self-inquiry through movement, through the body, through somatic expression and somatic therapeutic uses. And it's interesting. I have another conversation that I had with Dr. Nick Walker. I think you'll really enjoy that conversation. But Dr. Nick Walker is a somatic psychologist. His PhD is in somatic psychology. And he uses Aikido as his tool for somatic experiencing and understanding and inquiry. And he also has a deep relationship to these identity dynamics and these ideas of what is masculine and feminine, and what is just these identities, and also did not resonate with the rigidness of an identifier. And it's interesting to me that all of that also rings true for you, as far as you're speaking about relationship dynamics, and then there's this Soma thing that it just feels synchronistic. It feels like the way of the universe to tie all of those things together.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also the somatic aspect, which has to do with the embodied experiences, it has to do with something that I discovered when I studied human design.
Mm.
And my lines are 151. And one of the main things that I resonated with my profile as a projector 51 was that my message has to be practical. Like I cannot afford to be non-practical in the world, because then it will not be received the way it can be received if I'd be practical, and people will dismiss it. So when I realized that, then I got this whole thing about the somatic experience, which is the embodied, the practical. For me, body has to do with what you can see, with which is the practical aspect. So that's when I started to become more practical in my way of teaching too, instead of being ethereal. And it has worked.
Yeah, I love that. I resonate with that. The spirituality becoming practical, even like at a place like Envision Festival, people are experimenting with things like substances and things. There's psychedelic exploration that happens in the world, and when people are exploring with psychedelic substances, they find that at some point they're over fetishizing. I've said this before. They're fetishizing the substance, and the real value is the insight, wisdom gained from the experiencing, and then bringing it in a practical manner into your life. And then a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs can get very impractical and ethereal and things like this. And then it's like, well, okay, now how does this apply to my life in a way that makes my life work better?
The number one thing critique, like that's the number one critique I have in towards this spiritual world, which is like, it's too woo woo, like, yeah, you can speak about angels and the energy and other realms and all these things. And then I say, it sounds beautiful, but what it like, if now that I listen to you, how does that transcribe in a practical way into my life? Like, how do I apply all these things if there is something that is applicable actually? And otherwise, for me, it's bullshit, to be honest. Like, I don't connect with that.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I think that there's some ingrained intelligence in that sort of stance. I personally I stay a little gray though still. So I think that there is value. But maybe a part of this conversation is saying that a lot of the value in that ethereal speak is an aesthetic value, and so it's like it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful language, but it is not body. It is not body practical. It's not body intelligent. It's not. It doesn't have the same body value, and body is your physical expression. I like the aesthetic beauty of the ethereal language, but maybe it needs to be grounded. It's so head high, and it needs to be grounded. It is the shadow of that, I think, more in these last like few months. I've been more attuned to whether my nervous system is acting up or not. If I'm resonating with my nervous system training. I've been more involved in training the nervous system, when it is so woo woo, it is not grounded, and that is very exciting for the nervous system, and that has negative ramifications. That can be detrimental to how somebody is experiencing the lived world. But it's beautiful, and I like both, but practicality, bringing that into the physical world is really important, and I value your commitment to stay stay with that, to stay in alignment with that.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a poet too. I've been writing poetry for the last 8 years, and I have a very symbolical and metaphorical language integrated in myself. And when I write poetry, it's very cool. It's metaphorical. So I love language, and I love different ways in which we can romantically speak and use, like words to connect with other words and to metaphorically express ourselves into the world. I just do believe that when it comes to teach, I want to give something that is valuable to people and that they can take home, that they can actually take into their own practice and into their own way of life. And what I've seen is that if I give a lecture on angels and the beautiful way, just to mention a thing, like, I don't see how that can become practical. I think it's more delusional, and it has to do with the fantasy world. And if a person knows that, and they're open to receive symbolic knowledge, to create metaphors that then create worlds, then I think it's useful. Otherwise, I just think it's just nonsense.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Fadrique, the viewers, the listeners of this conversation, I know that they got so much value out of this. I personally got so much value out of this. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. So on Instagram, you're Fadrique.Soma. And you host workshops. You're hosting workshops in Costa Rica. You're hosting full retreats that look amazing. They look beautiful.
Yeah.
So how can people stay connected with your content and your information? How can do you do any of these retreats in English? I want to go to a full Fadrique Soma retreat, but if it's all in Spanish, I'm gonna miss out. And that's something, like, your information is so potent, and on Instagram it's all in Spanish, and you can translate, and some of it translates, some of it doesn't translate. And then and then I've the one that I spoke about earlier in this conversation, I had it like translate on there. And man, I just wish there was a way to just be in all the worlds all the time.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And that's something that I've struggled with, because I speak English very well. I'm not like, it's not my native language, but I can speak English well, and I know it's understandable. So I said to myself, like, fuck it. I think I'm sacrificing a large audience by not speaking in English. But at some point I had to decide, because it's but creating content is so overwhelming, and so it takes so much time. And for me, and right now I don't have like a translator that does my work. I'll perhaps have that in the near future, so that I can speak to the English audience. But yeah, I do private stuff in English. Like, I have English clients that they contact me, and I do workshops and I do private retreats in English, but that's only like for private users. Otherwise, most of my work, I'd say all of my work, is in Spanish. I do one international retreat outside of Costa Rica, one retreat in Costa Rica, and then I have an online formation, an online program, which is like my high ticket, and it's based on conscious relationships. And then I have one-on-one programs as well. So the way people can contact me is Instagram is my main channel right now. So that would be the way, with a DM, Fadrique.Soma, and that would be it.
Once again, I know people got so much value out of this, and I hope that they get an opportunity to connect with you at workshops and retreats and all the things to up-level their lives in their conscious relating to themselves, to others, to their friends, to their intimate partners. I think that is amazing, and it is It is a value to the thing. As I had said, as we'd said before, relationships are the most difficult thing in the world. And so to have a value that is directly helping resolving the conflicts in the most difficult thing is of such amazing value. Fadrique, thank you so much. And thank you for the conversation.
Brother, thank you for having me in your channel. It was a pleasure to have a convo with you and to connect with you again. And I hope to see you in person once again next year. Well, actually,
we will. I can't wait.
Ciao, brother. Have a good one.
You're thinking, who is this man talking to?